Think.
Okay. Reb Meir says, if that which is usually measured in large quantities was measured in small quantities, the small quantity comes under the rule of the large quantity. If that which is usually measured in small quantities was measured in large quantities, the large quantity comes under the rule of the small quantity. Which is the large quantity? For dry, 3 cobs, and for moist, 1 dinner. Rabbi Yossi says baskets of figs, baskets of grapes, or hampers of vegetables, so long as they are sold in lots, are exempt. Okay. One may give the poor demai to eat and the askana demai to eat. Rabbi Gamil used to give his workers demai to eat, and wardens of charity, Beis Shammai say they should give the tithes to those who do not tithe, and the untithe to those who tithe. Who tithe. Thus, everybody will eat tithe food, but the Chachamim say they collect without question and distribute without question, and whoever wishes to tithe, tithes.
Just by the way, an interesting thing over here is that normally when you have Beis Shammai on the one hand, you'll hear Beis Hillel on the other hand, but it says Chachamim Umrim,
Right.
which is curious. Why it's Chachamim versus Beis Shammai, as opposed to Beis Hillel versus Beis Shammai.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyway, carry on.
Right. Um, If one wishes to cut off leaves of vegetables in order to lighten his burden, he may not throw them away before tithing. If one buys vegetables in the market and decides to return them, he may not return them before tithing, for it is only lacked counting. If he was buying and saw another better batch, he may return it because he had not yet drawn it.
Right. So once again, it's the Indian the dividing line over here is: did he make a Kenyan? Did he not make a Kenyan?
Right.
Turn on your camera.
It's not on? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. I didn't do my hair this morning, so
Huh.
didn't take long. Okay.
Okay. All right. Mishnah Gimel. Have motzei peres b'derech u'natalan lo'ochlan. So somebody is walking along the road. Remember, we had the converse case of the guy who wanted to drop a bit because his load was too wide and he had to take. And now we've got the converse guy, the guy who's walking along, and he finds a bunch of peres dumped on the side of the road. And he takes them in order to eat them. But nimlach lahatznia, and then he decides, you know what, I'm gonna put them aside. He so he's gonna put them in storage. That's lahatznia. Okay, lo yatznia ad shi'aser. He has to take his chumas and masters before he puts them away. Okay. However, if originally he took the Paris because he said, Chaval, this is good Paris. I don't want them for myself, but let me just take them out and so they don't get destroyed, and maybe I'll be able to give them to somebody else, I guess. See. Right, so he wasn't really interested in the Paris. He just thought, Chaval, to let this go to waste. So then he doesn't take any chiyuv on himself to take chumas and masters from it. Why? Because the pasuk says aser to aser es kultvuas zaracha, and the drash of the chacham is your own things, because it's only your produce you have to maser, but other people's produce you don't have to do. Okay. Kol davar she'ein adam rashai lemochro demai lo yishlach lechaver demai. So anytime when you're not allowed to sell something as demai, you're also not allowed to give it as a gift to a friend as demai.
But when he was on the road, he took it. He picked it up and took it. So there's not a Kenyan already.
So it depends what his dice was when he picked it up. Because if he had dice not to make a Kenyan, then that's not a Kenyan. You can do that. Okay. All right. So we just said that in terms of giving a gift, say the Chachamim, you can't. The same rules apply to giving gift as to selling in the marketplace. If you're not allowed to sell it in the marketplace as demai, in other words, if you're not a wholesaler, or if it's some, maybe you have all those produce things that we learned in the first Mishnah that are typically from Hefker anyway, so you don't have to worry about demai from them. Those things you can't give to your friend as demai either. Rabbi Yossi matir bevadai ubilvad sheyodienu. So Rabbi Yossi says that if you have vadai tevel, and you've got a friend who's a chaver, and you know he's going to take masa, you can say, okay, he has a bunch of produce, and I just picked all these things off, these oranges off my tree. He has a big basket of oranges for you because I like you, but you'll need to take Chumas and Masos of it. Says Rabbi Yossi, that's allowed, as long as you inform him. But the halacha does not follow Rabbi Yossi. Now he says, but Rabbi Yossi notes only says this about vadai, because vadai people take seriously.
Right.
That, but he said, but Rabbi Yossi agrees that that Demai you can't send because maybe people will be mazalzel. Say, it's just Demai. Who really cares? It's probably had Chumas and Nasa taken off it. So that he says no. That he agrees with the Chachamim that you can't send that. Nonetheless, the halacha does not follow Rabbi Yossi in this Mishnah. Mishnah Dalet Hamolich Chitim Letochen Kusi. Okay, so the kusim, we've come across them obviously many times before. Just to remind you, the Samaritans were converts. They were people who Sancheriv dumped in Eretz Yisrael while he was in his policy of shifting people around so that in order to minimize rebellions, and the kusim arrived in Eretz Yisrael and they were attacked by lions, and they felt that this was supernatural, and they thought that wow, the God of this place is really powerful, so they decided to convert. And but they never really accepted the Torah Shebal Peh, and so they were always viewed with a lot of suspicion because they didn't accept Chazal, they didn't accept Torah Shebal Peh, and they didn't keep Shemitah properly either. And at a certain point in history, after the Mishnah, their status as Jews was revoked when it was discovered that they were worshipping the statue of Dav on Har Gerizim.
We still have Samaritans up in the north.
Yes, absolutely. They still exist. In fact, there's I recently got a picture of some I think it was oil or it was hummus. It might have been some hummus or something like that, or tahina that was, I think, it was tahina. It was tahina that was made by the Samaritans, and it had the hechsher of some badatz on it as well.
Really?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as far as we're concerned, they're just non-Jews.
It's true. Yeah.
So sure. I mean, you can have if you can have a hechsher on something made by
right.
any other non-Jewish company, why not from the Samaritans either?
Did you ever go to the museum that's up north?
Mm-mm.
There's a museum up there. I forget what the name of which town it is. It's right near Eureka, I think. Would that be possible? Maybe. Yeah. So anyway, there's a big museum there, and they have all these artifacts, all these things. They have a Sefer Torah there, and with different things. It's very interesting. So
Okay, so now talking about the kusi, so the kusim were also interesting in that the mitzvahs that they did take on, they took them on stark. They were even more strict than the Jews,
right?
To the extent that they wouldn't move out of their places on Shabbos. Because that's what the pasuk says. No person was allowed to leave his house. If you take it literally, you're not allowed to leave your house on Shabbos.
Right.
Okay. Whereas we take that pasuk to explain that that's the Techum. The Techum Shabbos you're not allowed to leave, and they took it to be. So sometimes it works to your advantage to have Chazal to interpret these things.
Right.
Anyway. So now let's say the guy who owns the local grinding mill is a Samaritan, or letochen am haaretz, or if the guy who owns the local grinding mill is an am haaretz. If whatever he hands over to them to grind, and he gets back a sack, he can assume that the chazaka has not changed. We don't suspect the kusi or the am haaretz of swapping the produce with something else. So he has no reason to swap them, and the kusim were also, it says lo sigzol, and the kusi doesn't want to be a gazlan, so why would he steal your produce?
Okay.
So you don't have to worry about it. However, when it comes to a non-Jew, a complete non-Jew, there he says demai. Now, what does it mean, demai? The kimach, the wheat the flour that he gets back from the from the grinder is considered demai, and you have to take maaser again from it because of suffix, because the nochri is suspected of swapping your flour with somebody else's flour. He might have swapped it with another one of his customers who is an am haaretz. Okay. Ha mafkid peiros of etzel akosi. Now, if he's just mafkid, not even for a grinding, he leaves his peiros by a kosi or etzel am haaretz. Don't have to worry that he switched it. Etzel anochri kapeirosav. But when it comes to the non-Jew, you have to suspect that maybe he swapped his produce for yours. And now, hang on, what's the problem with his peiros? If the nochri has grown, was growing produce in Eretz Yisrael, then what's the heter mechira? We say he's pater. All of his produce is pater from it. So once again, who's the Tana who doesn't hold by heter mechira? Do you remember this?
I was going to say Rabbi Meir, but
you are right. It's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir doesn't hold by heter mechira. He says if a non-Jew is farming in Eretz Yisrael, he doesn't have the mitzvah, but the produce it's a mitzvah on the chefta, not on the gavra.
Right.
Okay. So he's got so his produce needs to be tithed. So he's suspected of switching his produce with yours, and you've got to say that, and now you're going to have to take trumas and mashas again from him. Rabbi Shimon Omer Demai. Rabbi Shimon says no, that it's considered Demai. It's a suffix that he might have switched it. Okay. It's a truma lakohen. Oh, he says he Rabbi Shimon says it's like Demai in the respect that while you have to separate out the truma and the truma from safek, you don't have to give it to the kohen. Why? Because it's in the matter of safek. He can say and the truma is something that is now the monetary possession of a kohen. So let the kohen come and prove to you that this was actually switched. And then you'll give him the truma. Rather, so okay, you can't eat it yourself, but you can sell it to the kohen at truma prices.
So you go the kula rather than the chumrah.
So that's so it's a little bit of a kula on the Israel, because now he can actually get some money for the truma instead of having to give it free to the kohen. So what is the difference between Kaperasav and what, according to this first opinion that seems like Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Shimon says Demai. Kaperasav shalanochri haim shepaturim legamri min hamaser. Now that's another parish. Is that we're not talking about Rabbi Meir at all, and it's like Kaperasav means that it's like his parish in respect of the fact that they're completely patur. So we don't have to worry about it. Whereas Rabbi Shimon is coming and saying, no, you've got to worry that he switched it with Paris of an Amaretz. And therefore you've got to treat it as Demai. It seems a little more miyushav that way, because because the lashon is of Demai means that you're worried about him switching it.
But the halakha doesn't follow Reb Shimon.
The halacha does not follow Rabbi Shimon. So we treat it as the Paris of the goy. He's suspected of switching it, and since we hold that the goy is pater from Trumas and Masras, then it's pater from Trumas and Masras. So we don't have to. So assuming that you gave him metukan, whatever you get back from him is fine. Okay. Mishna, hey, hanosein lepundakis. So he comes to stay in an inn. And the pundakis is naturally a Jewish woman, and she wants to, and what she does is she has a service that you give her the food and she'll cook it up for you and give it back to you. Okay. The problem is that she's an Amaretz, of course. Maaser esru nosen, he has to take maaser before he gives it to her. The esru not tell me mena, and when she comes back with the steaming stew, back and puts it in front of him, he must take maaser again. Why? Because she's suspected of swapping with her own produce. Okay, and why? Maybe she burned it. Maybe she's got better. Maybe she's got. Maybe she did it as a. She did it because her produce was inferior quality, and she liked your produce. So she might have swapped it out and given you something else, and maybe you won't even notice. Okay, so and because she's an Amaretz, we have to treat what comes out as Demai. So he has to take Maser on the way out and on the way back in. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Ein anu achrain leramain. He says, why do you have to take responsibility for cheats, for people who might trick, for tricksters? Ein aser ela mashu not tell me mena bilvad. He says you don't have to take Maser before you give it to her. If she decides to steal it, that's her problem. Okay, just make sure that you master whatever comes back, and and then you're okay. And if she's if she stole, so let it what's it sleep in the bed that she made.
Right.
Okay. Whereas the halacha doesn't follow Rabbi Yossi over here. He does have to take master in both directions. Right. You're not allowed to take produce is not allowed to leave your hands until it's been mastered. Okay. Paya Zayin Hey.
Zayin Hey. A person who thins the vines, just as he thins his, he may thin that of the poor. That's Rabbi Yehuda. The Mayor says his own he may, but that of the poor he may not. A vineyard in his 4th year. Why not, by the way? Why doesn't he allow that? That would be a help for the poor.
Yeah, because it's the principle over here is that it doesn't belong to you. You're not allowed to touch something that doesn't belong to you, even if you think you're doing them a favor. Maybe they don't want you to do them a favor.
Right.
That's it. That's his thought. However, the halacha does follow Rabbi Yehuda that he's doing them a favor, therefore he can do it.
Yeah. A vineyard in its 4th year, Beit Shammai says he has no chomish and it has no removal, and Beit Hillel says it has. Beit Shammai says it has parrot and and the poor redeem them for themselves, and Beit Hillel says all of it is for the vat. Vineyard that is an olet.
That is entirely.
I know. Reb Eliezer says to the owner, Reb Akiva says to the poor, Reb Eliezer says, when you harvest the grapes, you should not glean it. If there is no harvest from where there is an olet, Reb Akiva said to him, and you shall not glean your vineyard, even if it is olet. And if so, why is it said, when you harvest grapes, you shall not glean it? The poor do not have olet before the harvest.
Okay.
Why don't I just read the Hebrew? It would be easier for me. Say the right words.
All right.
It might not be easier for you, though. You have to listen to it. Okay.
It's my pleasure to listen to you. Brachas Daled Hey.
Okay, Daled Hey. If someone was riding on a donkey, he must dismount. If he is unable to, he must turn his face. If he is unable to turn his face, he shall direct his heart to the Holy of Holies. If someone was sitting in a boat or in a wagon on a raft, he shall direct his heart toward the Holy of Holies. Reb Eliezer ben Azariah says the Musaf Tefillah is only recited with the city congregation, and the sages say with or without the city congregation. Rabbi Yehuda says in his name, wherever there is a local congregation, the individual playing alone is exempt from reciting the Musaf Tefillah.
The halacha is that we say Musaf even if we're davening b'yechidus, whether it's with the city in the city or out of the city. Okay. Mikvaos Yud Gimel.
The following knots do not require that the water should enter into them: knots of a poor man's clothing, of fringes of a sandal thong, of a tefillah of the head if it is tight, of a tefillah of the arm if it does not move up and down, of a waterskin lug or a pouch lug. Yosef HaKohen's inkwell was pierced on its side.
And I think you're going backwards.
I am. I realized that as soon as I started to say it. The following knots do not require that the water should be entered into them: the knot of the shoulder of an undershirt, the knot of an edge of a sheet. One also has to spread it out. The knot of the tefillin of the head, if it is not tight, of the tefillah of the arm, if it moves up and down, of sandal straps. Clothes that are immersed when washed need only to be immersed until they produce bubbles. Reb Yehuda. But if they're immersed when dry, they must stay immersed until they produce bubbles and cease bubbling.
Right. We said that when they're wet, even though there's a bubble above the water, and the clothing is like made this air bubble on top, because there's water inside the clothing, it's joined to the surface of the water, and therefore the clothing is considered immersed.
All handles of utensils that are too long and will be cut short need only be immersed up to the prescribed length. Rabbi Yehuda says only if it is completely immersed. The prescribed length for the chain of a large bucket is 4 handbreadths. For the chain of a small bucket, 10 handbreadths. They need to be immersed only up to these prescribed lengths. Reb Tarfon says only if the link is completely immersed.
Because there's somewhere, if you've got a chain, the prescribed length is going to end in the middle of a link. So he's saying you have to immerse the entire link. That's where it ends.
A string tied to a basket is not considered a combination unless it is sewn on. Okay. And by Shammai says we may not immerse.
We're done. We're done 3. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Kalim. Zain base.
Almost finished with Kalim.
What do you mean almost finished with Kalim?
Well, in my first volume.
We've got 30 prakim to
do my first volume.
Okay.
A shelf that is a receptacle for pots is tahor as a stove, but tameh as a utensil with a receptacle. Regarding its sides, that which touches the walls is not tameh as a stove, and regarding its wide side, Reb Meir rules it tahor, and Reb Yehuda rules it tameh. Now we have a shelf here. I have a picture of a where's my camera? Here it is.
Oh yeah, the shelf. Right, cool.
That's a cool thing.
Yeah.
Okay. The same applies if one turns over a basket and builds a stove on it. A stove that splits along its length is tahor, but if it's split along its width, it is tameh. A kupot that split either along its length or along its width is tahor. A courtyard above a stove, when it is 3 fingerbreadths high, it contracts tuma via contact and via airspace. But if it is less than this, then it contracts tuma via contact, but does not contract tuma via airspace. How is it measured? Rabbi Yishmael says one places the spit from the top to bottom, and the area opposite the spit contracts tuma via airspace. Eliezer Yaakov, Ben Yaakov says if the stove became tameh, the courtyard becomes tameh. But if the courtyard became tameh, the stove does not become tameh. If the courtyard was separate from the stove when it is 3 fingerbreadths high, it contracts tuma via contact and via airspace. But it is less than this, or if it was flat, it is tahor. The feet of a stove of 3 fingerbreadths contracts tuma via contact and via airspace. But if they are less than this, they are certainly tameh, and even when they are 4.
Okay. Done.
Basra. I just had a question for you on the yes. If in the courtyard, if the we said in the court. Let me find the exact words. What is 3 fingerbreadths high is contracts tuma via contract and airspace. But if it is less than this, it contracts tuma via contact, but does not
because it's too small to okay. The airspace is not considered airspace. It's too little to be considered airspace. I think, and therefore it needs to have contacts in order to transmit the tumor. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, Baba Basra, hey Tess.
Okay, if someone sent his son to a storekeeper with a pudyon in his hand, and he measured out for him an isser's worth of oil and gave him an isser, if he broke the jar or lost the isser, the storekeeper is liable. Rabbi Yehuda exempts him because he sent him for that purpose. We will come and agree with Rabbi Yehuda that when the jar is in the hand of the child and the storekeeper measured into it, the storekeeper is exempt.
Right. So what is the issue? Is that the storekeeper, even though the householder sent his kid along and that he was at his own risk, the storekeeper doesn't have the liberty of designating the kid as a shaliach to send it back home. So if the kid drops it, that's the pashia of the storekeeper.
Why doesn't he have he's giving it to the child, so the child's bringing it home.
That's right. But since the difference being if the child is holding the jug, then the storekeeper is going to be pater on the jug because he never took possession of it. And it's still the child's parent who's right. Taking responsibility for the fact that he gave it into the hands of the child. But okay. if he takes it himself and says, "Here, take this back to your father," Okay, so he's given it to somebody who's not a good shomer.
Right.
So it's his share if it gets broken.
Right. I hear it. A wholesaler must clean his measures once in 30 days, and a householder once in 12 months. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says the reverse is true. A storekeeper must clean his measures twice a week, wipe his weights once a week, and clean the scales for every weighing. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said, in regard to what was this stated, in regard to moist commodities, however, in the case of dry ones, it is not necessary. He is obligated to overbalance the scales in a handbreadth in the buyer's favor. If he was weighing for him evenly, he must give him the extra weight, 1 for 10 for moist commodities and 1 for 20 for dry ones. In a place where it is customary to measure with a small measure, he may not measure with a large one. With a large one, he may not measure with a small one. In a place where it is customary to level, he may not heap to heap, and he may not level. If one sells produce,
that's it. We've done.
That was this? Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
I believe you.
Yeah. Okay, Yoma. Base Vav.
A ram was offered with 11, the meat with 5, the intestines, the fine flour, and the wine with 2 each.
No, that's 11 people. Who's carrying everything onto the mizbeach?
The ox was offered with 24, the head, the hind leg, the head with 1, the hind leg with 2, the tail and the hind leg, the tail with 2, and the hind leg with 2, the breast and the neck, the breast with 1, and the neck with 3, the 2 forelegs with 2, the 2 sides with 2, the intestines, the fine flour, and the wine with 3 each. In which cases do the above apply? For communal sacrifices, but for personal sacrifices, if he wanted to offer, he may do so, and the flaying, the section of these, and of those are the same. The administrator said to them, go out and see if the time for slaughtering has arrived. If it has arrived, the one who sees it says, Barchei. Matisyahu ben Shmuel says, the whole of the east has lit up, as far as Hebron. And he says, yes. Why was it?
Okay, that's it. We'll learn the reason why tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Has to do with the moon.
Yeah, because the moon was too bright one time.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Have a lovely day.
You too.